Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings, and today this is Rinkitink in Oz. This particular Oz book is unusual. Unlike the other Oz books, I would say that this is a book that actually follows a mostly standard, for a kid's fantasy novel, a fairly standard fantasy novel questy format. This book starts with the story of a young boy whose name is Prince Inga of the island of Pingaree, and L. Frank Baum starts by sort of describing that this is a country that is relatively close to Oz. That you will find the great nonestic ocean washes the shores of the kingdom of Rinkitink, between which and the land of Oz lies a strip of the country of the Gnome King and a sandy desert. And then 4 days' journey by boat to the north of Rinkitink is the island of Pingaree. So, you have the island of Pingaree, which is ruled by the King Kitticut, and they are a peaceful island, and they just sort of, do their own thing. They collect pearls and sell them to the kingdom of Rinkitink, and the kingdom of Rinkitink then, uses them to trade with other places. Anyway, so Pingaree is eminently prosperous, but it's a very, very small island nation. And Prince Inga is, he's just a boy, but he's a very devoted and serious young prince. And one day, the king of Rinkitink, King Rinkitink, shows up and on Pingaree, and basically explains to everybody that he hates being king, and so he's decided to run away from being king. He's going to visit the people in Pingaree because, they always had these lovely these lovely pearls that they sold, and he wanted to see where everybody came from, and he's just basically avoiding his responsibilities, and he has brought with him, among other things, the highly entertaining scroll written by one of his people, which is a scroll describing how to be good, which is an entertaining item that basically, it kind of states the obvious endlessly. As usual, I haven't bookmarked anything, so I'm just quickly flipping through. He is a very, very fat man who arrives with his goat, Bill the goat. And Bill basically is his mount and carries him everywhere because he is so fat that he can't actually manage to walk any real distance. And, okay, here we are. The parchment entitled How to Be Good. And, a good man is one who is never bad. In order to be good, you must avoid those things which are evil. But in particular, the delightful thing is you may not find it as pleasant to be good as it is to be bad, but other people will find it more pleasant. Which I thought is one of the most obvious and yet, sort of genuinely best reasons to be good is you may not find it as pleasant to be good, but everyone else will. The fundamental reason to be nice to people is not that it's easier or better for you to be nice, but that everyone else will have a better time. Anyway, so they are invaded by the people of two violent island nations called Regos and Koragos, and basically the entire population of Pingaree is taken, including the king and queen. The only people who are left are Inga, Rinkitink, and Bilbil the goat. Rinkitink, because when he was running away he fell down a well, and they probably assumed he drowned or something. And Inga, because he was hiding up a tree and nobody noticed him, and he was smart enough to not try any heroics when he wasn't going to be able to succeed at them. So Inga decides he's going to go and rescue his people and the king and queen, his parents, and so he goes into the palace and he sneaks out the 3 magic pearls that his father tells him about at the beginning of the book, which are the great secrets. They were pearls given to them by the mer people several generations back, one of which is a pearl that makes you incredibly physically strong, one pearl which makes you impervious to all physical harm, and one pearl which speaks good advice. It appears to be kind of more oracular than with good advice, because it will tell you things that are not advice things so much as, if you stand on the shore at 3 a.m. tomorrow morning, there will be a boat. Which strikes me as being less wisdom and more oracle, but, good advice is good advice, even if it is advice from an oracle. It's sort of an oracle that actually gives you helpful advice instead of vague, oracular statements. Anyway, so Inga takes these 3 pearls and he marches off to rescue his people and his parents. And they have various adventures with the 3 magic pearls, obviously providing Inga with the strength to defeat armies and break into places, and the pearl that protects you, keeping him and anyone that he is touching from being injured. So he's able to basically walk into a city, and as people throw spears at them, they just kind of bounce right off. Anyway, so they go on their quest to save everybody, and the king and queen of Regos and Koragos, which are apparently one nation of 2 islands, with a king and queen who live on separate islands because they don't actually like each other, decide that Inga manages to defeat the people, in no small part because most of the people on the islands of Regos and Koragos really, really actually don't like the king and queen. So, they're not going to fight this kid who's invading with a fat king and a goat. They're basically going to let him do whatever because they don't actually care. And so the king and queen of Regos and Koragos abscond with Inga's parents, take them to the Gnome King. We remember the Gnome King, who is apparently a great deal more morally flexible than he appeared in the last book. Because with Betsy Bobbin and TikTok of Oz, the gnome that had taken over seemed to be nicer, but it turns out that he's not particularly morally apt either. He's just not as awful as the last king. Anyway, so the king and queen of Regos and Koragos say, can you please keep these 2, this king and queen of Pingaree, and keep them captive somewhere? And so the king of the gnomes does this, and when Inga shows up, he tries to rescue his parents and doesn't succeed, and then Dorothy shows up in a deus ex machina with a basket of eggs, because gnomes are terrified of eggs, and demands that the gnomes free the king and queen of Pingaree, and everybody heads back to Oz. And the whole adventure is really, really a normal adventure. It isn't the aimless wandering across strange people and strange places with strange traditions. I mean, Rinkitink is weird. But he's a kindly, good-natured weird that, while you wouldn't want to be trapped in a room with him, you also don't really dislike him. You just feel vague aggravation. Bilbil the goat is kind of awesome. And kind of like Beast in Beauty and the Beast, at the end of this he turns, because it turns out that he was transformed into a goat from something else, doesn't really matter, gets transformed back into a human and loses all of the personality that made him such a delight. But Bilbo the Goat is great. Inga is a paragon of virtue. And it's really, this is in a lot of ways, it's an entertaining story, but the appearance of Dorothy at the end feels very gratuitous, and it really does lack that distinct Oz flavor of just, whatever the rescue is just a MacGuffin to keep people wandering aimlessly through strange places. They're not aimlessly wandering through strange places. You start on Pingaree, which isn't particularly weird. They're just a peaceful island nation. You go to Rekos and Koragos, which also isn't particularly weird. It's just a couple of islands ruled by despotic tyrants. And, Rinkitink is, he is weird, but he's basically just the kind of flake who really shouldn't have become king, but since he is officially king, he kind of has to do the job. But he's not a bad sort, ultimately. But he's not weird in a, functionally you're saying this is just not a person that exists in the real world. He's kind of, there aren't going to be a lot of people like him, but he's not somebody that you look at and you say, wow, this could never happen. Inga is a little bit too serious and a little bit too perfect, but not in a strange way. And, the Gnome King, again, he's kind of, like I said, he's morally problematic, but he's morally problematic in a very open and honest way. He says, I don't particularly like dealing with weak people. I will deal with the strong ones, and the weak will get crushed underfoot, because that's just how I roll. And it's a lovely sort of bluntness of admitting that he's not a nice person. But it's a very limited number of people. It's not something where you go see a lot of strange places, where you deal with a lot of strange people. Nobody here is fundamentally a strange person to the caliber of Oz. There are no strange beings. There are no patchwork people or talking scarecrows or mechanical men, or it's just people. And so it's an enjoyable little book, but it stands out from the Oz series as very unusual by being normal. And it's a difficult, it's a strange thing. It's always a strange thing to say when you say something is standing out because it's normal. And that's what you have here, is you have a story of a place, of a fantasy story that is mostly normal. This would not be out of place if you cut the Oz references from this and simply had Inga succeed in some other way at, getting his parents away from the gnomes and everybody goes home happy without any reference to Oz at all. It would have been totally fine. It's a book that doesn't even need Oz, that it's kind of, it's very tangential to the Oz series, and I enjoy it. It's a good read and it's fun, but it's very distinctly out of place. Now, it's L. Frank Baum, written in L. Frank Baum's style. You wouldn't confuse this for another author, but it really does lack that travelogue quality that so defines the Oz books. So, I recommend it like the rest of the series, but I recommend it with a caveat that it's an odd little outlier from the series. Not merely because we have a boy as the lead character who doesn't turn into a girl at the end, but like I said, it's just such a coherent plot. It's weird. So that's everything that I have to say on this one, and I will see you all next week.